The stars themselves seemed to bend as the massive alien fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. 50,000 warships, each one the size of a small moon, arranged themselves in perfect formation. Their hulls gleamed with an otherworldly metal that reflected no light, making them appear as dark wounds against the starfield. Admiral Zexthol stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. His 4 arms crossed behind his back, as he studied the primitive planet that hung like a blue marble in the distance. Earth, the 3rd planet from a yellow star, home to a species that had barely managed to leave their own atmosphere. "Another easy conquest," muttered Commander Vex High, his second in command. The insectoid officer's compound eyes glittered with amusement. "These humans still use chemical rockets. They fight wars with metal bullets and explosive devices. I doubt they even know we exist." Admiral Zexthol nodded slowly. In his 300 years of service to the Kethvar hegemony, he had conquered 847 worlds. The pattern was always the same. Arrive with overwhelming force. Demand surrender. When the primitive species refused, demonstrate the power of advanced technology. Watch them submit within days. Open a communication channel to the planet, he ordered. The bridge crew worked efficiently at their stations. Massive screens showed Earth rotating peacefully below. Cities sparkled like tiny lights across the continents. Primitive satellites orbited the planet, completely unaware of the massive fleet watching them. "Channel open, Admiral," reported the communications officer. Zexthol stepped forward, his image now being broadcast to every radio, television, and communication device on Earth. He had given this speech so many times he could recite it without thinking. "Primitive species of the 3rd planet." His voice boomed across space, translated instantly into every human language. "I am Admiral Zexthol of the Kethvar hegemony. Your world now belongs to our empire. You have 72 of your rotational periods to surrender unconditionally." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Look up at your sky and see our fleet. We possess technology beyond your understanding. Our weapons can shatter mountains. Our shields can withstand the power of stars. Resistance is futile. Your weapons are toys compared to ours. Your defenses are meaningless." On Earth, emergency broadcasts interrupted every television program. Radios crackled with the alien message. Phone networks overloaded as people tried to call their families. In government buildings around the world, leaders stared at screens showing the impossible sight of the alien Armada hanging in space like a dark cloud. "Submit to our rule," Admiral Zexthol continued, "and your species will be preserved. You will work in our mines and factories. You will serve the greater glory of our empire. Refuse, and your world will burn. We have reduced 1,000 civilizations to ash. Do not let yours be the next." The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. The crew waited for the inevitable response. Sometimes the primitive species tried to negotiate. Sometimes they begged for mercy. A few even attempted to fight back with their pathetic weapons. All eventually surrendered. Hours passed. Then a new transmission reached the alien fleet. The image of a human woman appeared on their screens. She was middle-aged with gray hair and tired eyes. She wore a simple blue suit and sat behind a wooden desk. Behind her hung the flag of the United Nations. "I am Maria Santos, Secretary General of the United Nations," she said calmly. "I speak for all the people of Earth." Admiral Zexthol leaned forward, interested. The woman showed no fear, no panic. That was unusual. "We have received your message, Admiral Zexthol," Maria Santos continued. "We appreciate you taking the time to introduce yourselves. However, after careful consideration, we must respectfully decline your offer." A ripple of surprise ran through the alien bridge. Commander Vex High clicked his mandibles in confusion. Did she just Refuse? Furthermore, the human woman said, her voice still calm and professional, we consider your presence in our solar system to be an act of aggression. You now have 71 hours and 59 minutes to remove your fleet from our space. If you do not comply, we will consider ourselves at war. The transmission ended. For a moment, the alien bridge was completely silent. Then Commander Vex High began to laugh, a horrible clicking sound that filled the air. Soon other crew members joined in. The laughter spread across the communications network to other ships in the fleet. Did you hear that? Vex High gasped between laughs. They threatened us. These primitives actually threatened the Kethvar hegemony. Admiral Zexthol did not laugh. Something about the human woman's manner disturbed him. She had shown no fear, no desperation. She spoke as if she actually believed Earth could resist them. Admiral, called the tactical officer, should we begin the demonstration bombardment? This was standard procedure. When a species refused to surrender, they would target a few major cities. Not enough to destroy the planet's workforce, but enough to break their spirit. Fear was often more effective than destruction. Yes, Admiral Zexthol replied. Target their largest population centers. Minimal casualties. We want them frightened, not extinct. The alien fleet moved into position. Massive energy cannons emerged from the warships like metal flowers blooming in the void. Power readings climbed as the weapons charged. Each shot contained enough energy to level a mountain. Weapons locked on targets, reported the tactical officer. New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, and Moscow are all in range. Fire, ordered Admiral Zexthol. Beams of pure energy lanced down from space toward Earth. They burned through the atmosphere, like falling stars, leaving glowing trails in the sky. Each beam carried enough power to vaporize entire city blocks. The beams struck their targets. Light flashed across the planet's surface. The energy readings showed perfect hits on all 5 cities. Then the tactical officer frowned at his console. Admiral, I'm reading. This can't be right. What is it? Zexthol demanded. The targets, sir. They're still there. All readings show direct hits, but the cities appear undamaged. Admiral Zexthol moved to the tactical station and studied the readings himself. The energy had definitely struck Earth. Every instrument confirmed successful strikes. But when he looked at the visual displays, the human cities remained exactly as they were before. People walked the streets. Traffic moved normally. Nothing had changed. Fire again, he ordered. Double the power. More energy beams struck Earth. This time, the aliens watched carefully on their visual displays. They saw the beams hit the cities directly. They saw the flash of impact. But when the light faded, the buildings stood untouched. People continued, their daily lives as if nothing had happened. This is impossible, whispered Commander Vex High. Our weapons are functioning perfectly. Every reading shows successful hits. Admiral Zexthol felt something he had not experienced in centuries of conquest: uncertainty. In all his years of warfare, he had never encountered anything like this. Energy weapons that struck but did no damage. Cities that survived direct orbital bombardment without so much as a broken window. Try kinetic weapons, he ordered. Massive projectiles launched from the alien fleet. Chunks of metal the size of buildings accelerated to incredible speeds. They struck Earth with the force of meteors. Again, every instrument showed perfect impacts. Again, the cities remained untouched. Admiral, the tactical officer's voice shook slightly. Shall we try the antimatter charges? Zexthol stared at the planet below. Earth continued to rotate, peacefully. Its cities glowed with electric lights. Its people went about their business as if the most powerful fleet in the galaxy was not trying to destroy them. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Zexthol wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Dr. Sarah Chen adjusted her glasses and looked at the massive screen showing the alien fleet in orbit. Around her, The Global Defense Council watched in tense silence. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, in a facility that officially did not exist, humanity's greatest minds had gathered to witness the first test of Project Mirror. "All dimensional barriers are holding steady," reported Dr. Marcus Webb from his station. "The alien weapons are passing through the phase variants exactly as predicted." Sarah nodded. 13 years ago, when Earth's deep space monitoring stations had detected the first alien scout ships at the edge of the solar system, she had been a young physicist working on theoretical dimensional mechanics. Now she was the project leader for humanity's most impossible defense system. "Dr. Chen," called General Rodriguez from across the room, "the aliens just fired antimatter charges. That's enough firepower to crack a continent." Sarah watched her instruments carefully. The antimatter explosions bloomed like tiny suns above major cities around the world. The energy readings were staggering. Any normal planet would have been turned into burning slag. "Phase displacement, holding at 99.7%, she announced. "The real cities are completely safe." On the main screen, they watched live feeds from New York, London, and Tokyo. People walked the streets normally. Cars moved through traffic. Children played in parks. Above them, antimatter explosions that should have vaporized half the continent passed through the atmosphere like ghosts. The impossible truth was that these people were not actually there, not in the dimension the aliens were attacking. 13 years of preparation had led to this moment. When humanity first detected the alien scouts, world governments had made a choice that seemed insane. Instead of building weapons to fight the aliens, they decided to hide from them. Every major city on Earth had been rebuilt, not with concrete and steel, but with quantum engineering that existed in a parallel dimensional space. 8 billion people now lived their daily lives in pocket dimensions that perfectly overlaid the original locations. The Earth, the aliens, saw was mostly empty space, populated by quantum echoes and holographic projections. "How are our people handling this?" asked President Morrison, who had flown in from Washington just hours before. Sarah smiled. "They're watching it on television. Most think it's the greatest science fiction movie ever made." The genius of Project Mirror was not just the dimensional displacement. It was the way humanity had hidden the entire operation. To the people living in the phase-shifted cities, nothing had changed. They still went to work, still paid taxes, still complained about traffic. Their cities existed in exactly the same locations, just slightly outside normal space-time. Only a few thousand people knew the truth. The rest of humanity continued their lives in perfect safety, completely unaware that they were currently being bombarded by weapons that could destroy planets. "Dr. Chen," Dr. Webb called out urgently, "the aliens are trying something new. It looks like they're charging some kind of exotic matter disruptor." Sarah frowned at her readings. "I see it. That's actually clever. They're trying to disrupt quantum coherence at the subatomic level." "Will our defenses hold?" General Rodriguez asked. "Should do," Sarah replied, but her voice carried a note of concern. "We've tested against every theoretical weapon system we could imagine, but this is the first time we're facing actual alien technology." The exotic matter beam struck Earth with a sound like reality tearing. For a moment, the dimensional barriers flickered. Several cities phased partially back into normal space before the compensators kicked in and restored full displacement. "Close," Sarah muttered, adjusting her controls, "but not close enough." In orbit, Admiral Zexthol was losing his mind. For 6 hours, his fleet had bombarded Earth with every weapon in their arsenal: chemical explosives, energy beams, kinetic projectiles, antimatter charges, quantum disruptors, even experimental weapons that barely existed in theory. Every single shot had struck perfectly. Every instrument confirmed successful impacts. Earth remained completely undamaged. "Admiral," Commander Vexhi's voice was strained, "perhaps we should contact the hegemony, request additional support or new weapon systems." Zexthol turned away from the tactical display. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered anything like this. The humans were not deflecting their attacks or absorbing them. The weapons were definitely hitting the planet. They just seemed to have no effect whatsoever. "What are we missing?" he asked aloud. "What could make a planet immune to every weapon we possess?" "Perhaps," suggested the science officer, "the humans have developed some form of defensive technology we don't understand." Zexthol laughed bitterly. "Defensive technology? These are the same creatures who still use chemical rockets to reach their own moon. Their most advanced computers are less powerful than our children's toys." But even as he said it, doubt crept into his voice. The evidence was undeniable. Either his fleet had somehow malfunctioned in ways that defied all logic, or the humans possessed capabilities far beyond what they appeared to have. Meanwhile, on Earth, Sarah Chen was preparing for the second phase of humanity's response. Project Mirror had been designed to buy time, not to win the war. Now that they had proven the aliens could not harm them, it was time to show what humanity could really do. "Dr. Chen," President Morrison approached her station. "How long until Captain Morrison can launch?" Sarah checked her chronometer. "The retaliation finishes its final dimensional calibration in 20 minutes. Jake should be ready to go." "And you're sure this will work?" Sarah looked at the man who led the free world. "Mr. President, we've spent 13 years developing technology. That shouldn't be possible. We've hidden 8 billion people in parallel dimensions. We've made our planet immune to every conventional weapon in the universe. At this point, I'm not sure what impossible even means anymore." She turned back to her controls. "But yes, sir. Phase 2 will work. The aliens are about to discover that humanity doesn't just play defense." Above Earth, Admiral Zexthol made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Frustrated beyond reason, he ordered his fleet to fire everything they had at once. 50,000 warships unleashed their full arsenal simultaneously. The combined firepower was enough to shatter moons. The energy release was so massive it briefly outshone Earth's sun. Radiation alarms screamed across the alien fleet as they watched enough destructive force to sterilize a dozen worlds strike the small blue planet. When the light faded, Earth continued to orbit peacefully. Its lights twinkled in the darkness. Its people went about their lives. Admiral Zexthol sat heavily in his command chair. For the first time in 3 centuries, he felt truly afraid. Not of death in battle or failure in conquest, but of the unknown. Of a universe that suddenly seemed far stranger and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving another transmission from the planet." The image of Secretary General Maria Santos appeared on the main screen again. She sat in the same office behind the same desk, but now she was smiling. "Admiral Zexthol," she said pleasantly, "I hope you've had time to test your weapons. We're quite proud of our defenses. They've performed exactly as designed." Zexthol found his voice. What are you?" "We're human," Maria Santos replied. "But I think you're about to learn that means something very different from what you expected." Her image faded, leaving the alien bridge in stunned silence. In the distance, Earth continued its eternal dance around the sun, completely untouched by the greatest military force in galactic history. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Retaliation, humanity's first and only true interstellar warship. Unlike the massive alien dreadnoughts hanging in Earth's orbit, his ship was almost embarrassingly small. At 300 meters long, it was roughly the size of an old aircraft carrier. Compared to the moon-sized alien vessels, it looked like a minnow swimming with whales. "Final dimensional calibration complete, Captain," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the navigation station. "We're ready to phase into normal space-time." Jake nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the alien fleet. 50,000 warships arranged in perfect formation, still firing uselessly at Earth's dimensional barriers. They had no idea what was about to hit them. "Weapon status, Mr. Chen?" Jake asked his tactical officer. "All probability cascade systems are online and charged," Lieutenant Commander David Chen replied. "Reality manipulation fields are stable at maximum efficiency." Jake took a deep breath. 13 years of preparation had led to this moment. 13 years of building impossible technology based on theories that most scientists said violated the fundamental laws of physics. 13 years of turning humanity's greatest weakness into their most powerful weapon. "Take us in," he ordered. "Let's show these aliens what humans do when someone threatens our home." The retaliation materialized behind the alien fleet like a ghost becoming solid. One moment, the space was empty. The next moment, a small human warship hung in the void, its hull gleaming with an oily rainbow sheen that seemed to bend light in impossible ways. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, a sensor technician noticed the new contact and nearly dismissed it. "Admiral, we have a small craft appearing behind the fleet. Primitive design. Minimal energy signature." Admiral Zexthol barely glanced at the display. "Probably some human attempting to flee their doomed world. Ignore it." "Sir, the vessel appears to be approaching our position." Now Zexthol looked. The tiny ship was indeed moving toward his fleet. Its course would bring it directly into the formation of dreadnoughts. "Hail them. Tell them to change course or be destroyed." The communications officer worked at his station for several seconds. "No response, Admiral. Wait, I'm reading massive energy buildup from the human vessel." Before anyone could react, the retaliation fired its first shot. Not a beam of energy or a kinetic projectile, but something far more terrifying. A wave of altered probability swept out from the human ship and washed over the alien fleet. The effect was immediate and impossible to explain. On 36 alien dreadnoughts, critical systems began failing simultaneously, not from damage or wear, but from pure coincidence. Fusion reactors that had operated flawlessly for centuries suddenly developed quantum fluctuations. Navigation computers that had never malfunctioned started producing random errors. Weapon systems that were maintained perfectly began overheating for no apparent reason. "What's happening?" Admiral Zexthol demanded as alarm klaxons began wailing across his ship. "Unknown, sir," the engineering officer called out. "We're experiencing cascade failures across all major systems. But there's no damage. Everything just stopped working properly." The same reports flooded in from ships across the fleet. Dreadnoughts that had conquered 1,000 worlds were suddenly as helpless as broken toys. Crews that had maintained their vessels with religious precision watched in horror as everything went wrong at once. Captain Morrison smiled grimly as he watched the alien fleet's formation begin to break apart. "Target the command ship," he ordered. "Full probability cascade. Let's see how lucky Admiral Zexthol feels today." The retaliation fired again. This time, the wave of altered probability focused specifically on the Eternal Dominion. The massive flagship, pride of the Kethvar hegemony, began experiencing the worst luck in the history of galactic warfare. The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, throwing crew members around like rag dolls. The main computer core developed, a software glitch that made it believe the ship was flying backward. The hull plating began loosening as molecular bonds decided to weaken at exactly the worst moments. Life support systems started recycling air in reverse, creating pockets of vacuum in random corridors. "This is impossible!" Commander Vexhai screamed as he clung to his station, while the bridge spun slowly around its axis. "Ships don't just malfunction like this!" Admiral Zexthol hauled himself to the communications console, fighting against gravity that seemed to change direction every few seconds. "All ships, concentrate fire on the human vessel. Destroy it immediately." But when the alien fleet tried to return fire, they discovered their weapons had the worst timing in military history. targeting computers locked onto empty space, energy cannons fired at precisely the moment power conduits decided to overload. Missile launchers jammed with ammunition that suddenly forgot how to detonate properly. The few shots that did fire missed, by impossible margins. Beams that should have struck dead center somehow bent around the human ship. Missiles that were programmed with perfect targeting data inexplicably flew in wrong directions. It was as if the universe itself was protecting the tiny Earth vessel. Dr. Sarah Chen watched the battle from the command center deep beneath the Alps. The main screen showed the retaliation dancing between massive alien warships like a fighter. Pilot dodging elephants. Around the small human ship, one of the most powerful fleets in galactic history was falling apart from pure bad luck. Probability manipulation is holding steady, she reported to the assembled world leaders. Jake's ship is creating a localized field where favorable outcomes for humanity become statistically inevitable. President Morrison leaned forward in his chair. And the aliens? They're experiencing the opposite effect. Every possible thing that could go wrong for them is going wrong. Their ships aren't being destroyed by our weapons. They're being destroyed by the universe deciding they deserve really, really bad luck. The genius of humanity's weapons was not in their destructive power, but in their complete rejection of conventional warfare. Instead of building bigger guns or stronger armor, human scientists had learned to manipulate probability itself. They had weaponized coincidence. Captain Morrison watched another alien dreadnought lose structural integrity as its hull plates decided to expand at different rates, creating stress fractures that spread like spiderwebs across the massive vessel. "Target the next group of ships," he ordered. "Let's see how many coincidences they can handle." The retaliation fired repeatedly, each shot spreading waves of altered probability through the alien fleet. Ships that had never experienced equipment failure suddenly had every component break down simultaneously. Navigation systems that were programmed with perfect stellar coordinates began flying into each other. Communication arrays that had functioned flawlessly for decades started broadcasting random noise. Most disturbing of all, the alien crews found themselves making terrible decisions for no apparent reason. Experienced officers gave orders that made no sense. Skilled technicians began repairs in ways that made problems worse. Veteran pilots forgot basic flight procedures they had known for centuries. Admiral Zexathol felt his ship shudder as another section of hull plating decided to detach itself and float away into space. Around him, his bridge crew struggled with controls that seemed to be working against them. Every button they pressed produced unexpected results. Every command they gave made their situation worse. "Admiral," the tactical officer called out, his voice strained. "We've lost contact with 40% of the fleet. The ships aren't destroyed, but they're just not responding. It's like their crews have forgotten how to operate spacecraft." Zexthol stared at the main display, watching the small human vessel weave effortlessly between his dying ships. It moved with impossible grace, as if it knew exactly where every shot would miss and every debris field would form. Meanwhile, his mighty fleet was reduced to a collection of floating wrecks held together by bad luck and worse timing. For the first time in his 3 centuries of military service, Admiral Zexthol began to understand what the humans had tried to tell him. This was not a battle between primitive and advanced technology. This was not even a battle between different species. This was a battle between those who played by the universe's rules and those who had learned to rewrite them. The retaliation fired one final massive probability cascade. Across the alien fleet, the last functioning systems failed in perfect synchronization. Command ships lost all power. Communication arrays went silent. Weapon systems locked into safe mode and refused all attempts to reactivate them. In the space of 30 minutes, the most powerful invasion force in galactic history had been reduced to a collection of helpless hulks drifting in Earth's orbit. Captain Morrison opened a communication channel to the alien flagship. "Admiral Zexthol, this is Captain Morrison of the United Earth Ship Retaliation. Do you surrender?" Admiral Zexthol sat in the wreckage of his command chair, staring at the communication screen showing the human captain. Around him, the bridge of the Eternal Dominion sparked and flickered. The mighty flagship of the Kethvar hegemony was now nothing more than a floating tomb, its systems destroyed by the worst luck in military history. We surrender," he said quietly, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Captain Morrison nodded respectfully. "Admiral, we're sending someone to speak with you. Please do not be alarmed by their method of arrival." Before Zexthol could ask what that meant, a woman simply appeared on his bridge. Not through teleportation or any technology he recognized. She just decided to exist there, as if she had always been standing beside his command chair. Ambassador Elena Vasquez looked around the damaged bridge with sympathy in her eyes. She was a middle-aged human woman with silver hair and a calm expression. She wore a simple black suit that seemed completely unaffected by the sparks and debris floating around the alien ship. "Admiral Zexthol," she said gently. "I'm Ambassador Vasquez. I represent Earth's diplomatic corps. I hope you and your crew are not seriously injured." Zexthol stared at her in shock. She had appeared inside a shielded, secured military vessel without triggering any alarms or sensors. She stood in a room where the artificial gravity was malfunctioning, yet her feet remained firmly planted on the deck. Most impossibly, she was breathing normally despite the life support systems being completely offline. How are you here?" he stammered. Elena smiled sadly. "The same way your ships are falling apart, Admiral. We've learned to step outside the normal rules. But I'm not here to discuss our technology. I'm here to tell you the truth about what just happened." She gestured to a section of wall that suddenly reformed itself into a comfortable chair. Elena sat down as if having furniture appear from nowhere was perfectly normal. "You came here believing you were conquering a primitive species," she continued. "Your intelligence reports showed us using chemical rockets and projectile weapons. You thought we were centuries behind your technology." Zexthol found his voice. "Your species has barely left its home planet. You have no interstellar empire, no advanced weapons. We've been watching the galaxy for millennia. If Earth possessed technology like this, we would have detected it." Elena's expression grew more serious. "Admiral, humanity has been aware of galactic civilization for over a century. We've been watching, learning, and preparing. Every primitive aspect of human civilization you observed was carefully designed theater." She waved her hand, and the air above them filled with three-dimensional images. Star maps showing the positions of alien fleets, detailed technical readouts of Kethvar technology, combat footage from dozens of alien conquests across the galaxy. "We've been monitoring your empire for 87 years, Elena explained. "We know about every world you've conquered, every species you've enslaved, every weapon in your arsenal. We've studied your tactics, your technology, your weaknesses." Admiral Zexthol stared at the displays in growing horror. The technical specifications were perfect, more accurate than his own files. The tactical analyses showed an understanding of Kethvar military doctrine that surpassed even their own strategists. "This is impossible," he whispered. "If you possessed this knowledge, this technology, why did you remain hidden? Why didn't you contact the galactic community?" Elena stood and walked to the damaged viewport, looking out at Earth hanging peacefully in the distance. "Because we were afraid of exactly this, Admiral. We studied galactic civilization and found an empire built on conquest and domination, species after species reduced to slave labor, worlds stripped of resources to feed an endless war machine." She turned back to face him. "We realized that revealing ourselves would only make us another target, so we chose a different path. We became invisible." The images around them shifted, showing Earth as it really was. Cities that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Humans who had transcended biological limitations while retaining their essential humanity. Research stations scattered across parallel realities where teams of scientists studied alien technology in perfect safety. For the past century, we've been building a civilization that exists outside normal space-time, Elena continued. We developed technology that makes us immune to conventional attack. We learned to manipulate reality itself. Admiral Zexthol felt something that his warrior species had no word for. Complete philosophical vertigo. Everything he thought he knew about the universe was crumbling around him. You could have destroyed our entire civilization, he said slowly. Couldn't you? Elena nodded. Easily. At any point in the last 50 years. We have weapons that could unmake your empire from within, technology that could rewrite the laws of physics in your home systems. We could have made every HFY ship in the galaxy forget how to function properly. She sat back down, her expression becoming gentle again. But we chose not to, Admiral. Do you know why? Zexthol shook his head numbly. Because we're not conquerors, Elena said. We don't believe in domination through force. We don't think that might makes right. Despite having the power to rule the galaxy, we chose to remain hidden and let other species find their own paths. The ambassador stood and walked closer to the alien admiral. Your empire has conquered 847 worlds, Admiral, but you've only ever encountered species like yourselves. Beings who play by the same physical laws, who think in terms of energy and matter and conventional space-time. She gestured to the images still floating around them. You've never encountered a species that learned to step outside the universe's operating system and rewrite the fundamental code of reality itself. Admiral Zexthol felt his worldview collapsing entirely. His species had built their identity around being the strongest, the most advanced, the natural rulers of the galaxy. Now he was facing beings who were so far beyond the HFY that his people might as well be insects in comparison. What do you want from us? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Elena smiled, and for the first time, it was a warm expression instead of a sad one. We want to offer you something your species has never experienced, Admiral. Something no one in your empire has ever known. She extended her hand toward him. We want to offer you friendship, partnership, the chance to become something more than conquerors. Around them, the damaged bridge began repairing itself. Broken consoles reformed, sparking wires reconnected. The artificial gravity stabilized. Life support systems hummed back to life. In moments, the Eternal Dominion was functioning perfectly again. We could share our technology with any species willing to abandon conquest and embrace cooperation, Elena continued. We could teach you to transcend your physical limitations, to explore realities you never dreamed existed, to become partners in building something greater than any empire. Admiral Zexthol looked around his restored bridge, then back at the human woman who had casually rewritten the fundamental structure of his flagship. And if we refuse? Elena's smile faded slightly. Then you're free to leave. We won't stop you. We won't pursue you. But you'll never be able to return to this system. And any ship that threatens Earth or humanity will experience the same difficulties. Your fleet just encountered. She moved toward the center of the bridge. The choice is yours, Admiral. You can return to your empire and report that Earth is too dangerous to attack. You can maintain the status quo of conquest and domination. Or, Elena paused, looking directly into his 4 eyes. You can stay and learn what it means to be part of something built on hope instead of fear. Built on cooperation instead of domination. Built on the belief that the universe is stranger and more wonderful than any of us have ever imagined. Admiral Zexthol sat in silence for a long moment, staring at this impossible human who had shattered everything he thought he knew about reality. Around him, his restored bridge hummed with perfect efficiency. Outside the viewport, Earth continued its eternal dance around the sun, home to 8 billion beings who had chosen cooperation over conquest despite having the power to rule the galaxy. For the first time in 3 centuries of military service, Admiral Zexthol began to feel something he had never experienced before: curiosity about what might be possible if he chose hope instead of fear. 6 months later, Admiral Zexthol stood in the observation deck of Harmony Station, watching ships from a dozen different species work together to construct humanity's latest impossible creation. The space station existed simultaneously in normal space-time and 17 parallel dimensions, allowing crews to work on the same project from multiple realities at once. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Amazing, isn't it?" said Dr. Sarah Chen, joining him at the massive viewport. The human scientist had become his guide to understanding the new universe humanity was building. "6 months ago, these species were all part of your empire. Now, they're working together on projects that seemed impossible." Zexthol nodded slowly. When he had first chosen to stay and learn about human cooperation instead of returning to the Kethvar hegemony, he thought he was making a tactical decision, a way to understand the enemy better. He had never expected to become part of something that challenged everything he believed about civilization itself. "The Veltar engineers are brilliant with quantum harmonics," he observed, watching a group of blue-skinned aliens install impossible machinery that hummed with reality-bending power. "I never knew they were capable of such work when they were enslaved in our minds." Sarah smiled. "Most species never reach their full potential under conquest. Fear and oppression tend to stifle creativity. It's amazing what people can accomplish when they're free to explore their abilities." Through the viewport, they watched a group of young beings playing in a section of the station that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Human children laughed, alongside alien youngsters, as they chased each other through spaces that folded in ways that defied conventional geometry. Their parents, representing a dozen different species, watched with the universal expression of adults trying to understand how children could make the impossible look so easy. "Admiral," Sarah said gently, "we received another message from the hegemony yesterday." Zexthol's mandibles clicked in what humans had learned was a sign of concern. "What did they say this time?" "Emperor Vexitar is declaring you a traitor to your species. He's demanding your immediate return for execution. He's also massing a new invasion fleet, 5 times larger than the one you brought." Zexthol felt the familiar weight of his old life pressing down on him. For 3 centuries he had served the Kethvar Empire without question. He had conquered worlds in the name of order and progress. He had believed that strength gave his people the right to rule over others. Now he stood in a space station built by voluntary cooperation between former enemies, watching children play games that required understanding physics in 17 dimensions. And he wondered how he had ever thought conquest was the path to greatness. "What will humanity do?" he asked. Sarah's expression became thoughtful. "We've been debating that. President Santos wants to continue our policy of non-interference. Let the hegemony come, defend ourselves, but not actively seek conflict. And others disagree? Some think it's time to act more directly. The hegemony has enslaved hundreds of species. They're planning to attack Earth with weapons designed specifically to break our dimensional defenses. At what point does non-interference become complicity in oppression?" Zexthol understood the dilemma. Humanity possessed the power to liberate every enslaved world in the galaxy. They could free billions of beings from oppression with minimal effort. But doing so would require them to become conquerors themselves, even with the best of intentions. "There's a third option," he said quietly. Sarah looked at him with interest. "What do you mean?" "The species here on Harmony Station. The Veltar, the Quinhai, the Mordek. They all have families and friends still enslaved in hegemony space. They've seen what's possible when species work together instead of being forced to serve." He turned from the viewport to face her directly. What if they chose to return home, not as conquerors but as liberators, showing their people what they've learned, offering them the same choice you offered me? Sarah's eyes widened as she understood. A revolution from within. Former slaves returning with technology and knowledge that makes them impossible to re-enslave. More than that, Zexthol continued, they would return with proof that there's a better way. That cooperation creates more than conquest ever could. That freedom makes people stronger, not weaker. Over the following weeks, word spread throughout Harmony Station about Admiral Zexthol's proposal. Species that had spent centuries under Kethvar rule began volunteering to return to their homeworlds, not to hide or rebel, but to demonstrate the impossible. The first ship to leave was commanded by Engineer Velnin of the Veltar. Her people had been enslaved for 2,000 years, forced to work in quantum mines that stripped entire star systems of exotic matter. Now she piloted a vessel that existed partially outside normal space-time, carrying technology that would make such mining not only unnecessary, but primitive. "We're not going to fight the occupation forces," she explained to the assembled crews before departure. "We're going to make them irrelevant. When my people see that we can create more exotic matter in an hour than the mines produce in a year, the economic foundation of the empire will begin to crumble." More ships followed. Each carried former slaves returning home with knowledge and technology that would transform their worlds. But more importantly, each carried living proof that the beings the hegemony had dismissed as inferior were capable of achievements that surpassed their former masters. Admiral Zexthol chose to return, as well but not to his homeworld. Instead, he requested permission to travel to the heart of the Kethvar Empire itself, to face Emperor Vextar and offer him the same choice humanity had offered to everyone, cooperation or continued isolation. President Santos personally came to Harmony Station to see him off. "Are you sure about this, Admiral? You know he'll try to execute you the moment you arrive." Zexthol clicked his mandibles in what humans had learned was laughter. "President Santos, 6 months ago I commanded a fleet that could shatter moons. Today I understand physics in 17 dimensions and can manipulate probability itself. I think I can handle one angry emperor." The human leader smiled. "Just remember, you're not going there to conquer or threaten. You're going to offer hope." "I understand," Zexthol replied, "though I think Emperor Vextar is going to have difficulty accepting that someone he declared a traitor has become more powerful than he ever dreamed possible." As Zexthol's ship prepared to depart, Dr. Sarah Chen made a final check of the dimensional phase variance systems that would keep him safe during his journey. The technology was a gift from humanity, but he had learned to operate it himself. Former slaves and conquerors alike were proving capable of mastering abilities that had once seemed like magic. "Admiral," she said as he prepared to board. "What? Will you tell the Emperor?" Zexthol considered the question carefully. "I'll tell him the truth, that I came to Earth expecting to conquer primitives and instead discovered that we were the primitives. That humanity didn't just defend themselves with impossible technology, they defended the very concept of hope itself." He paused at the airlock. "I'll tell him that there's a place in the universe for everyone, even for an empire built on conquest, but only if they're willing to learn that cooperation creates more than domination ever could." 6 months later, reports began reaching Earth. From across the galaxy, the Kethvar Empire was experiencing unprecedented changes. Worlds that had been enslaved for millennia were declaring independence, not through violent revolution, but through demonstrations of capabilities that made their oppression impossible to maintain. Emperor Vextar himself had begun implementing reforms that seemed impossible for such a rigid military hierarchy. Some said he had been influenced by visits from a certain former admiral who now served as ambassador from something called the Galactic Cooperation Council. President Santos read the reports with wonder and satisfaction. Humanity had faced the greatest military threat in galactic history, and responded not with superior firepower, but with superior hope. They had shown the universe that impossible things were simply things that hadn't been properly understood yet. And across the galaxy, billions of beings were learning that the universe was far stranger, far more wonderful, and far more full of potential than anyone had ever imagined. In his final log entry as a military officer of the Kethvar hegemony, Admiral Zexthol wrote, "Personal note. I came to Earth to conquer primitives. Instead, I discovered that we were the primitives. Humanity didn't just defend themselves with impossible technology. They defended hope itself. They showed us that the universe is not a place where the strong rule the weak, but a place where cooperation makes everyone stronger than they ever dreamed possible. Today I begin my new life as an ambassador to the stars, carrying a simple message. The impossible is just another word for not yet understood. And in a universe where humans can rewrite the laws of physics themselves, I'm beginning to think that nothing is truly impossible after all."